Hi everyone, my name is Dominic Arajado. I'm a web developer, and these are guides, tips, and tricks to web development. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to create your own pagination component in React and TypeScript, and also learn how to write tests for it using JS and testing library. So pagination components can be seen in both classic and modern websites today. They are a way for users to navigate through a series of pages. So it can either be a blog post, search results, or a product catalog. And in this pagination component, you can't possibly display all the page numbers. If it's more than, 50, hundreds, what you can do is basically swap them with the ellipsis or the dot, 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 which represents the numbers in between them. So what a pagination would look like, I'm going to show you now. All right, so this is the pagination component that we'll be achieving by the end of this video. So as you can see, it's currently displaying page numbers from 1 to 20, but we can't possibly display all the numbers within the UI. So we have set a max length of or maximum length of numbers or items in the pagination. So that is 7. So 1, 2, 3, including the ellipsis is 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's just use 7 throughout this tutorial to make it simple to understand. And I think 7 is the best number to represent the pagination, all the logics for the pagination. So as you can see, if the current page is 1, the ellipsis is in the middle. So if I go to 2, it's still in the middle. But once I go to 3, the ellipsis moves towards the right. The current page is still displayed, and there's still a numbers around the page, the current page. And then we go to 4, there's still numbers beside the current page. Ellipsis has shifted to the right because we want to maintain the maximum length of 7. So now if I change to 5, current page is now in the middle with numbers around it, and there's now 2 ellipses. And we still can see the number or the first page and the last page. So we know for a fact that we always display the first page, the current page, and the last page. And we try to display the numbers around the current page. So if I go through, it will always be in the middle. The current page is always in the middle. So just to highlight or like to give you a suggestion that for max or pagination component, our maximum length should always be odd so that we can put the current page in the middle. So if it should be like 7, 9, 11, so that, it's always in the middle. We can place the current page in the middle. So yeah, I'm just going to go through, and now if it's 17, right, I can display the numbers, all the numbers to the right. There's one number beside it, and then the ellipsis to represent 2 to 15, and then the first page. If you count this, this is still the maximum length of 7. So 18, 19, 20. So yeah, you're probably thinking, how do we achieve this pagination logic? Don't worry about that. I'll be guiding you through that each step of the way. Yeah, a couple of assumptions right here is that you know a little bit of web development background. You know HTML, CSS, JavaScript. If you're new to TypeScript, that is fine. And if you're new to writing tests in JS and testing library, that is also totally fine. I'll be guiding you throughout this tutorial. So yeah, to quickly get started with React, you want to use Create React App. It's the officially supported way of creating single-page React applications. So yeah, since this is built in TypeScript, we want to do is copy the TypeScript template of the Create React App. Copy this code, open your terminal, and yeah, paste this and change the my app name to React TypeScript Pagination. So that will be the project file name or folder name. I already run this before, so I don't have to enter this. You can just enter this and it will basically install all the dependencies of Create React App. Once you've done that, you can open Create React App project in your IDE. So I'm using Visual Studio Code as my IDE because I'm gonna use some of the extensions to help me write code faster. So let me just open this. Yeah, so let's just quickly test this and see if it's working fine using the yarn start. So it's one of the scripts in TypeScript. By the way, I'm using Yarn. It's basically like NPM, but faster, they say. And yeah, I'm using Yarn start. This just basically to start the application. Okay, so now once you run it, you should see something like this in your terminal, and you should see this in your browser in the port 3000. That is the default port of Create React App. And yeah, if you see this, that means that everything is fine. Now we can start coding. And I'm just gonna put this beside this so that we can compare and see our progress. So first thing you wanna do, so I just wanna show you as well that I already added some of the configuration for Prettier. So Prettier is a code formatter. It will automatically format the code for you in a certain way so that you don't have to do it every time you save your file changes. So this is the settings for VS Code to activate Prettier as the default formatter. And then this is the configuration for Prettier. This is the Prettier ignore. So it will not format files under these folders. And to show you the extension, this is Prettier. Make sure to install it if you want to have the code formatter. And I'm also using React Snippets. This will help me write React components boilerplate faster. And yeah, those are the things. So now let's proceed with the code changes. So I'm just going to clear app.css here. We don't need the tests yet. We want to clear this off. Let's change the class name to container. So this will be the container of our pagination component. We don't need the logo anymore. And let's delete this logo.svg. In the index.css, we don't need this code. But we want to add in all the elements a box sizing property, border box, so that, you know, when you size width and height, it doesn't affect if there's a padding or padding inside. All right, so yeah, I think that's it. So we want to add a title here, React TypeScript Pagination. And then let's style this container. So in the container, we want to have a width of 100%. You want to set a max width of 800 for desktop. And then we want to centralize this in case it reaches the maximum width. To put it in the center using margin auto. And then we want to add padding. All right, so that is it, basically it for the app container. So as you can see, the title is here. We compare it to your expected. Yeah, it looks definitely the same. Now let's proceed to creating our pagination component. So in the pagination component, it has a list of items inside of it. So this would represent each of the page numbers, including the previous and next button. So let's create a component. And usually what I put all the components that I create in a components folder, so that it's more organized that way. So first what we're going to do is the page link. So what I'm going to call each of this individual component, this single page number is a page link. So page link.tsx. So we're using tsx here because remember we're rewriting this in TypeScript. So instead of JSX, the file name should be tsx. That's how TypeScript would know that we should enforce TypeScript in this file. So using the snippets, like I mentioned earlier, I'm using a extension from VS Code, which is the React Snippets. So this will suggest when I type RFC, it will suggest me what component I will need to create. So usually I use the functional component. Once I press enter, it will automatically write the boilerplate for creating a functional component. So that's really a time saver for us. And this should be an anchor element. And what I want to do, so this is if you're new to TypeScript, this is what we call a type alias. So I'm gonna define the type on top of the component here and name it as props. So it can be any type of name. It can be a page link props. But since I'm not having any elements here, I just want to keep it as props. So what should this page link accept? So what I want to do is basically whatever React library enforces on this element, I'm going to use that. And they have expose a same alias for HTML props. So this is exactly the same what they did here. It's an interface or a type, same thing, but there's a minor difference between them. You can do your research on what's the difference, but basically we can reuse that and basically pass in an argument. So it accepts an argument of what type of element you want to have in this HTML props, because this is how it will decide with what properties it will enforce on the element. So since this is an anchor element, we can use anchor element here. So this is a global interface already available, so we don't have to import it from anywhere. So now if I just have the arguments props here, this is how I define the type. So using colon. So now this page link should accept props as long as it meets this type. So HTML props. So what are the props inside of it? You can check the HTML props, all attributes, then look for the anchor elements. So I'm not gonna display that. There's too many, but you know what? One of it is href. You can see there's href. Yeah, so that's one of the properties of an anchor element based on the HTML props from React. So we can just spread it out like this. And we want to replace and get the children. So in the HTML props, children is also unavailable. So we can do like this structuring here, pass the children. And now we can pass the children. And then for the other props, it will be part of the attribute of the anchor element. So what else can this anchor element have here? So actually we have the class name. We have the class name right here, right? We want to add our custom class name. So what we can do is basically have a class name here. We want to add PageLink here, but we also want to support the other class name in case it passes from the parent component, something like this. And instead of doing this, I want to introduce to you a library called class names. So in class names, we can programmatically add classes to an element without, so sometimes in class name, you might not want to pass a class, right? So there's just an extra space here that is unnecessary. So class name would help with that. And also the way you write, for example, conditional class names. So for example, active class, you only want to add it if it's true, or active is true, or like disabled prop. If it's true, then you add a class. So using class name, it would be easier and more programmatically way of controlling the class name. So I'm going to import that from class names, and then we can do is replace this with a simple string. All right, so now what we have here, so if class name is undefined, this will not add in a space in between them. So it's just page link. So that's great. So what other props can we support? We want to support the disabled prop. So if disabled is true, you want to add it in the class. So we can add it using an object. So if this is true, it will be added in the as part of the class name of the anchor element. If it's false, then it won't add disabled prop. So disabled prop here is already a Boolean or undefined. And we also want to support active state as well, because if you remember in the UI of our expected pagination component, we want to show like a dark blue for the current page. And for the disabled prop, we also want to add the disabled styles here. You see that it's not clickable, there's no hover state. So that's why we want to support these two and use the class name to style them. Okay, so if you can see, there's a TypeScript error here because active is actually not part of the HTML props of an anchor element. So what we can do, you can extend this using an n, ampersand, and then add in the type. So active should be optional. So using the question mark here, if there's no question mark, it will be enforced, but we want to keep this at optional. So it can be a Boolean or undefined. So using the question mark. So what happens here is this is an object of props, because props is an object, right? And this another object which contains active. So what the ampersand will do is will basically merge them and merge both of these two to become one. So now it will support HTML props as well as an active prop. So yeah, I think that's okay. So what we want to do as well, if it's disabled, we don't want to expose the anchor element. If we inspect this expected pagination component, so you can see if it's disabled, it is rendering as a span element, because we don't want to make users navigate through that page using the anchor. We want to make the disabled page link as disabled, and we're using span. And yeah, let's implement that logic. So if disabled, we only return a span. So we want to also still render the text, and we want to follow the class name. So let me just extract this and create a variable, custom class name, pass this as a class name here, as well as in the anchor element. Okay, yep. Now, so last but not the least, for the anchor element that is currently the current page, we want to add a attribute called the area current. So if you search what area current is, it basically indicates what element represents the current item in a set of related elements. So that's exactly the perfect explanation of what the current page is. It is the current page of the series of pages. And this also helps to improve your, accessibility. So we want to add that area current, and in area current, it accepts different strings. So basically define what kind of series of elements are these. So there's one for page for exactly for pagination. So you can do is basically if it's active, you want to pass page. If it's not, it's undefined. So if it's undefined, you will not add this attribute in the element. All right, so we're done with the page link. So later we'll be using PageLink to style this component. So we'll be doing that later. But for now, I want to create is the pagination component. So this will be the reusable component to basically render all the pages in a pagination. So using the snippets, and we can use nav element here because pagination is a navigational element. Then remove this. Now we can do some loops here. Let's just add a class name, pagination, and we can also add the area label here. So this too helps improve the accessibility of our pagination. So we need to tell what this navigation element is about. So what does this navigation element do? So it's just use pagination. Okay, so what we can do, remember we have the previous and next button. Let's use the page link and pass previous and next as the text or the children. And in between, I'm going to create a static array here first. Let's just hard code the numbers. So 1, 2, 3. And let's loop this. The page num. And then let's use index as the key. Okay, so let's use page link, page num as the children, key, index as the key. Let's just add some href here. Since this is anyway an anchor element. All right, so now I think we should be able to see something. Nope, we haven't imported this in our app component. So now we can do that. Pagination. Okay. All right. So we should see something on our page. Okay, we do. So we see previous 1, 2, 3. All right, so I think we're ready to style these components. We want to make this look exactly the same as our pagination component here. So let's start with the pagination. Let's create a class or a CSS file, pagination.css, import it here. Okay, so inside the pagination, we can start the class name pagination and just add display flex. I think that should be good enough. And now let's create the file for PageLink CSS. So here we're using PageLink. What I want to do, basically add this style. We want to make this display as inline flex. Okay, let's see if, yeah, it still looks so fine. We want to add a border around it. So this is a gray border. Border of 1 pixel, solid. And this is the hex code for that grayish border. Let's see. Okay, we haven't imported it yet, so let's import that. PageLink.css. Okay, so you see there's a border. Let's add some padding. 10 pixels. All right. Yeah, we're looking as we add more styles to it, it's looking to be what we want to expect it to be. Okay, so add some background color here. Should be white. And then the color of the text should be blue. Should be blue. Yeah, most of them are blue, except if it's disabled. Later we'll be styling that as well. This is the hex code for the blue. All right. You want to add a font size, font weight, 500. We want to remove the underline. Okay. All right. So I just want to add a cursor here. Okay, so yeah, it looks almost there. There's still some slight discrepancy. So if you see on the corners of the first and the last element, right, the previous and the next, there is a rounded corner, right? Let's implement that. So you want to target the first element, or we can use the first child. In this case, we can add a border top on the left and border bottom on the left. So border top left radius, it should be 5. So same thing at the bottom. So we can do the same thing for the last child. But let's just see what happens now. As you can see, there's a border radius on the edges of the first child. Now let's just do the same for the last child, but in this case, it would be on the right. Okay, great. All right, so what we want to do next is basically eliminate this extra thickness on the borders in between the numbers. So as you can see, it's of course after the first child. So anything after that, like 1, 2, 3, and next have this thick border size. So what we can do is basically add a style after the first child. So we can do that using the not selector. So not first child, and just add the margin left. So we want to shift it to the left. So instead of adding more margin, we deduct the margin. So -1 pixel. So as you can see, now the thickness of the border in between them are now back to the same as the outer part. So it's almost the same. Now we want to add is the hover styles. So if page link is hover or it's in focus as well, let's add the style for both. What we want to do is add the background color to be slightly grayish. So this is the hex code. As well as the color, let's also change it to be slightly darker. All right. Yeah. Hover styles are working. And let's add the styles for the active. So for the active, we want to change the color to white. And want to add the dark background color. So that would be this. Same for the border color as well. Okay. So we actually haven't added the active class here. So if it's active, if the page number is the same as the current page, so we will need to introduce a current page. So page num is equal to current page. So we need to pass in the props from the pagination component. So let's define a type props. So current page should be a number. So using this, we can add the type for the props and destructure this. You can get the current page. So now the app should pass a current page. So the current page here should be a number. So maybe I'll just add a state over here for the current page. So set current page as 1. So let's use this 1 for now. Pass this one. And now, yeah, there's an active state right now. So I wanna, maybe I just add in the same thing for, ticking the next and the previous and the numbers. So we should be able to control the state. So let's have another prop, which is a set current page. And how you wanna pass a type for the function is pass a function like this and what it returns. So it returns, it returns nothing. So let's just use void, and it should accept an argument, which is the page. So page should be a number as well. So you can do an on-click listener here. So on-click, we set the current page. Now let's destructure this. Set current page using the page num from this loop. For the previous element, previous button, whatever is the current page, we want to deduct it by 1 so that it goes to the previous number. So it should be the current page minus 1, and for the next element would be just the opposite. So if you want to go to the next page, just add 1 to the current page. So now it should work fine. Oops. Now its TypeScript is complaining that we should pass the set current page. So you can already see how TypeScript is really helpful for, defining the type, and it will already catch the errors just before you build them. So yeah, TypeScript's really good for that. Okay, now when I click, okay, now it changes numbers. I use previous and next, and it just does it. So as you can see, if I go below 1, it actually doesn't show the current page. We should disable the previous button so that it doesn't go below 1. So let's add the disabled state here. So if current page is already 1, or which means the first page, then it should be disabled. So same thing for the next element. If it's already the last page, so currently we don't have these props yet. It should be coming from the parent component as well. So here, let's just make this static. That's number 3, last page. All right, so ideally in production or like a real application, the last page would be coming from the backend or the server. So for now, let's just hard code it for the purpose of this tutorial. All right, so yeah, now it should be disabled. So if I refresh this page, now I cannot click after the 1, but I can click next, and yeah, I'll be stopping at 3. So right now we don't have a style for the disabled. So let's just add that. So PageLink, if you remember, we are using disabled style. if it's disabled is true, we're gonna add disabled as part of the page or as part of the custom class names. So we want to do is prevent any clicks or any hover state using the pointer events none. As you can see, there's no hover state anymore to the previous. And then let's change the color text to be gray. This is the gray color. As you can see, yes, now it's disabled. Go to the next. You see I'm on the last page. Now it's disabled for the next button. Great. So what else can we do here? We can basically, if you see, if I try to do a tab, I press my tab in my keyboard, there's this outline here, but it's not really showing the corner of the right side because the current element is not is because of the z index property. So what we can do, if it's focus, we want to add a z index here, so 3. So if the z index is higher, then that makes the element even on top of the other element. So by default, z index is, I think, auto or 1. So all of them are equally, and they'll just be based on whoever the last part. So now, if I do the focus or the tab key, now it's displaying the outline property. So we can do the z index on the active element as well, and just make this 2, so that the border color will be exactly around it. It's not really obvious, but yeah, it's just good to have this. And if it's in a hover state, it doesn't interfere with the focus. All right. And lastly, I think we can just add a transition here for color. Let's just add an is in out transition. I'll do the same for the other properties such as background color and border color. So now if I hover, there's a smooth transition of changing of the background color and the text. Great. So yeah, we basically achieve the expected style for the pagination component. Now it's time to figure out the logic of this ellipsis thing and how to, generate the number of the items in the pagination component. So what we want or what we expect is we need a function that will generate the numbers, whatever we need to display in between the previous and the next button. And that should be an array of numbers. And what we will only have is the current page and the last page. And of course, there should be a max length as well. So if you remember in what I mentioned earlier, for max length, we will just be using 7 as the max length, so that's easier to, understand each of the scenarios of these ellipses. So let's just pass 7 here. All right, so what do we do next? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to edit this reference of ours to display all of the scenarios or all of the different arguments with this tree, or actually just these 2 because max length will always be 7. Just these 2 to see all the different scenarios that we need to handle to generate the expected items in the pagination. So let me just do that. Okay, so now I'm displaying different types of arguments or different arguments in each of the pagination component and how it is displayed. So I want you to focus on the first 2 elements here, or first 2 examples here. So we have current page as 1, last page is 5. And max length is always going to be 7 throughout these examples, but I'm just displaying it here. So if it's current page 1 and 5, this is how it's going to display. We can only display up to 5 numbers or pages because our last page is 5 and 5 is lesser than the max length, so we can display all the numbers. So in the second example, the last page is 7, which is equal to the max length, but still we can display 7 items because we have 7 pages because our last page is 7. In this first 2 examples, pretty straightforward. We can display all the numbers, and yeah, you can go through all of this and change the current page, and the items in the pagination would remain the same, just that the active props would change. Okay, for the third example, here we are now displaying the ellipses because the last page is more than the max length. We can't possibly display all the numbers because we want the items of the array or the pagination should remain as 7. So in this case, we are replacing the numbers in between with an ellipsis. So 4 to 7 are part of this ellipsis. And yeah, if your current page is 1, this is how it should be displayed. If your current page is 9, it will still be the same, just that the active stage different, but the array of numbers or items would remain the same for this first two for these examples right here. Now let's look at the next set of examples. Now you can see the current page is in the middle. That's because 5 is about in the middle of 10. Same for 6 is also about in the middle of 10. So as you can see, the current page is in the middle. There's numbers around it, and then beside the first page and the last page, there's an ellipsis. So there's 2 ellipses in this case because we can display 2 and 3. We can display 7, 8, 9 here. So same thing for if the current page is 6, we can display 2 to 4 and 8 and 9. All right, so that's the ellipsis where we have 2 ellipses. Now for the last sets of examples, this is where the ellipsis is not in the middle and it's just 1, but it's more towards the right or towards the left. So that is depending on where the current page is. So if the current page is near the first page, then the ellipsis will be near to the last page. Same thing for this one. And you can see there's always a number, at least one number beside the current page. So 2 and 4, 3 and 5. Yeah. And yeah, they're basically the same sets of examples. And yeah, this is what we need to achieve by the end of this video. And I hope you're not scratching your head right now. If you are, and that's fine because we're going to tackle this one by one. And yeah, don't worry about it. How to best tackle this problem is basically break them into smaller pieces so that it's easier to achieve. As you solve small parts of the problem, by the end of this video, you basically realize, oh, I already solved this problem. I basically achieved what I was expecting it to achieve. And yeah, so the reason why I've been going through each of the examples is that's how we're going to solve it. So we start with the basic example or the straightforward solution, and then the next set, then the next set. So that's how we're going to construct this function. So yeah, we basically know we need to generate this array, the expected array based on these 3 arguments. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to add the logic in this component. I'm just going to create a library folder and create a file called pagination.ts. So instead of JS, it's TS because we're using TypeScript here. And I'm going to create a function. So I'm going to name this function as get pagination items. So this will basically generate an array of numbers. So if you remember, our argument should be the current page, and this should be a number. Last page should also be a number. Max length as well should be a number. Let's just return an empty array for now. And you'll get an error because in TypeScript, for objects like array or an object itself, it doesn't know what's going to be inside of it. In this case, it's complaining that you need the default type is any, so anything can be inside of it. You need to help TypeScript here to enforce the type of this array. So what should be inside the array? So we know for a fact that it should be an array of numbers. So this is how you do it. You use the array interface, and inside the array interface, you can accept an argument of what should be inside of it. So you can write it as like this as well. So this is the same. It will be an array of numbers. So I like to use the former so that I know that when I read it, it's an array of numbers. All right. So yeah, as I said, let's tackle this one by one. So in the first two examples, in the observation we can do here, we know that if the last page is equal to the max length or less than that, we can just basically just loop from the first page to the last page. And first page is always 1, by the way. And then the last page is depending on the argument that is being passed on the function. So in this case, we actually don't need the current page yet, but it's just for the first set of examples. So if last page is less than the max length or equal to it, then we just iterate. So using the for loop, we start from 1, which is the first page, and we iterate till the last page plus plus. Let's push that to the array. And what I want to do here, so I'm just gonna add a console log here. Console.log get pagination, so that we know what is the function returning depending on the argument. So first page is 157. So I'm copying this 157. And what we expect here, it should return 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And for the next set of examples, current page is 5, last page is 7. In this case, it should loop until the last page, which is 7. All right, so we added this console logs here. And then I want to call this function, pass in all the arguments, current page, last page, max length. Yeah. Okay. Now we can open the console tab, and yeah, you can see it's able to achieve the expected array just by looking at the console logs. We can compare it with here. Yeah, this is exactly what we want. We want to display pages 1 to 5 and 1 to 7. So yeah, we're basically done with the first set of examples. We are generating the expected result array. Now let's move on to the next one. So here in this case, ellipsis is in the middle, is what I want to call it. So in the else condition, this is where we handle all the ellipsis logics. And then what we need to do is handle the ellipsis in the middle. Okay, so how do we handle this? Let's observe it for a moment. So in this case, our current page is 1, last page is 10, and the ellipsis is in the middle. So if the current page is 9, it will still be the same. So let me just write that down. So if it's 10 for both last page, and if either of the current page is 1 or 9, then the result should be something like this. So this is still 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that is the max length, which what we have defined here. And it will still be the same if the current page is 9. So we can say even if it's 2, it will still be the same. Or if it's 10, it will also be the same result array. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 9, and 10. So if either of the current page is this one and the max page is 10, then the expected result array would either be these two. So we can basically say that if it's near the current page or the last page for a certain value, then we can implement the ellipsis in the middle. So basically, how do we know if it's near the current page or the last page? So we can minus or get the difference. So current page is 1. Let's use this example here. Current page is 1. First page is 1. So we just deduct current page minus first page, we get 0. So if we do this for the one that's near the last page, we can do is current page is 9, last page is 10. So we just deduct last page minus current page. Is how we get to see that is 1, which means if it's either 1 or 0, that means it's either near the first page or the last page. So depending on what we're subtracting here. So let's just use the other examples here. 2. So 2 minus 1 is 1. And if it's 10, 10 minus 10 is 0. You can see it's either 0 or 1. That's when we know we need to implement the ellipsis here. Ellipsis in the middle here. So how do we get this values right here? And we want it to be dynamic. We can't just basically keep this 0 and 1, because what if our max length is 9? Then we need to extend it further. So now it's the number of elements is 9. So 4, 5, then plus 4 is 9. So the items in the array is 9. And it doesn't just support these arguments to do the ellipsis in the middle. It can also support now 3 and 8. And if you minus 3 minus 1, that will be 2. Not just 0 and 1, that now it will support 0, 1, and 2. So how do we get this dynamic value? So let's go back again to our assumptions that the confirmed pages that we always have to be part of the result array are the first page, and let's just define it as first. So we need to have the first page, which is 1. We also have the current page, which will be coming from here, and the last page. We always know that. We always know that there's these 3 are the confirmed elements in the array. So let's define that here. Confirmed pages count. So these 3. So the first page, current page, and last page. So let's create a variable here, confirmed pages count, which is 3. Now we can deduct the max length with 3. So deducted max length minus confirmed pages. So basically we're deducting it because we want to know what's left, or how many items can we fill in the expected result array. So this will be 7 minus 3 will be 4. So the deducted max length will have a value of 4. And this means that we need to fill in the remaining 4 elements in the array. And because ellipse is in the middle, we have to divide this into 2, because we need to generate 2, 3 on the left side, and then 8, 9 on the right side. So we divide this by 2. Let's call it as side length. So deducted max length divided by 2. This is how we get number 2 here. So we need to fill in 2, 3, and 8, 9 on both sides. So that's why I call it side length. So now we have 2 here. If you notice, 2 is actually greater than these numbers right here. So you can actually use the side length to basically know when to handle ellipses in the middle. So we can basically do what we done here. So current page minus first page is less than the side length, or is less than 2. That means that this first example right here and the third example right here will be true with this condition. And we can do an OR to handle the last page. So last page minus current page is also less than side length. Then if either of these 2 are true, then we should put the ellipsis in the middle. Great. So now we have the if condition right here. And what do we do now? So now it's time to basically populate the numbers on the left side of the array. So on the left side of the array, we basically count from 1 to the 3. So we know there's already 1, and we know we need to fill in 2 numbers. Remember the 2 here? This is the side length. So let's do a loop. We start with, I'm going to use j here because we already use I, just to make it less confusing. So we start with 1. start with 1, which is the first page, until how many times? So how many times do we need? Do we need 2, right? So you can do first page here. Then maybe just use first page plus the side length. So until 1 plus 2, which is 3, we iterate until there. So if the j is less than or equal to first page minus plus side length, maybe I'm just going to use 1 here, j plus plus, then we push that. Okay, let's save this and let's see what's the console log for these 2 examples right here. So now you can see it's generating from 1 to 3, which is almost there, half of the expected array. Now we need the ellipses. So here in this case, I can push the ellipses, but instead of using the ellipsis string, we know that we're expecting an array of number, right? And I'm not gonna add in an OR here. This is how you can do an OR in TypeScript. So basically, this array can contain number or string. But then if we do this, then we have to handle when we pass the set current page, and that just becomes more complicated. I'm just gonna use number still. And instead of an ellipsis, I'm gonna use none. Yep, I'm using none here. So we're gonna use none as the ellipsis. And then we can do a logic here. If it's not none, page num is not none, then we just render the page num. If it is, then we replace it with an ellipsis. And this how we can also do an disabled here. If it's none, then it should be disabled. It should have a disabled, styling, same as the previous and the next button. So yeah, just keep in mind that none is ellipsis. All right, don't get confused by that. So if we save this, we can see that 1, 2, 3 none. What we expect here is both none instead of the ellipsis, and then 8, 9, 10. So we just need to generate from 8, 9, 10. How do we do that? We basically push, do a loop, another loop. How many times same thing here, but we start from the last page minus the side length. So now after k is j is k, so last page minus side length. So 10 minus 2 is 8. So we start with 8. And then it shouldn't be, k should be less than or equal to 10, which is the last page, and then k plus plus. All right, so we just push this. And now we should be able to get the expected array for this. All right, so we do get it. We do get 1, 2, 3, 9, 8, 9, 10. Awesome. So if we do this for both 2 and 10 as well, it should still be the same. Yep, and it does. So you can see the last 4 is basically using these 2 right here. Okay, so now we have solved the ellipsis in the middle. So we can scratch this first 4. Now let's go on to solve or handle the ellipsis, the 2 ellipses, or basically when the current page is in the middle. And why I said that it's in the middle, the number of the current page is somewhere in the middle. How do we know this? So let's maybe write in the arguments for that first, so that we can easily see. So 5 and 10. We want 5 in the middle. Replace it with ellipsis. Same thing here. We want 6 in the middle. So 6 and 10. We should be surrounded with numbers 5 and 7. Okay. So we can actually use the same logic here as how we did to determine when to handle such case. So if current page is 5 and first page is 1, 5 minus 1 is 4. If current page is 6, last page is 10, 10 minus 6 is 4. All right, so you can see this 4 looks very familiar because we already have this. We already have 4 in our variable, which is the deducted max length. So if either of these, or if both of these are correct, or if true, if this difference is also 4 and 4, this is when we handle the ellipses, or the two ellipses, basically, because we want the current page to be in the middle. So 4 is somewhat in the middle of the 7. And if, for example, we have the numbers 4 and 10, if you 10 minus 4, that's already greater than 4. If 6 is greater than 4, then it shouldn't have the two ellipses. Or like, for example, 10 minus 3 or 3 minus 2, it doesn't equal to 4, right? This 4 will be dynamic, and we can use the deducted max length. So let's use that. So what are you going to do? You're going to do the same thing here, but in case instead of less than side length, we want it to be greater than or equal to the deducted max length. And we cannot use or here because we want it to be in the middle. So both of this conditions should be true. So it should be equal to 4 or greater than or equal to 4. That's when we know that the current page is in the middle of the first page and the last page. So it needs to be an end here. So using same thing here, but change the check deducted max length. All right. So now this is where we handle ellipses in the middle. Oh, no, ellipses, two ellipses. Sorry. Because the ellipsis in the middle is this one. And the ellipsis in the middle. All right. So what do we do now? So we want to generate this array. So we know first page is that's easy. We can just push first page or first page, yeah. And then we can just push none as well. That's the push none. So if we look at our console log, it's basically 1 and none. We already solved this too. So how do we solve for this 4, 5, and 6? So we know we need to generate at least 1 on each side. So that's 2. Remember 2? 2 is our side length here. So we can use that. And we need to deduct this by 1 because we manually added the none or the ellipses here. So if you understand the logic for side length, it's basically need to generate these two sides of the current page. So these two, then these two right here, but we manually added it. So we just have to deducted side length. Okay, so just minus 1. And that's how we know how much to generate the numbers around the current page. So we basically start from the current page minus 1, which is 4, and current page plus 1, that's where we end. So 4 to 6. Yeah, same thing for if the current page is 6, we want to start from 5 to 7. So that's 1 on each side. So the loop will be something like this. So we start with the current page minus the deducted side length. That would be 5 minus 1, so 4. And we want to end at 6, so that is current page plus 1, or plus the deducted side length. So L should be less than or equal to the result of this one, and then L plus plus. So let's push the L here in the result array. And let's see. So now it's returning 1, none, 4, 5, 6. All right, that's exactly what we want. And same thing for here, 5, 6, 7. And now we can just simply push the none and push the last page. And that's how we achieve the two ellipses logic. Great, so we're almost there. We actually already solved more than half of the scenarios. We just have to now, the last thing we need to handle is when the ellipsis is not in the middle. So here are the arguments or the examples. So if it's 3 and 10, 4 or 7 or 8, the ellipsis is not in the middle. We only have one ellipsis, but it's not in the middle. And you can also notice that If the current page is near the first page, the ellipsis is more towards the right side. So if you can see here, 4 is still near the first page, ellipsis is more towards the right or near the last page. And then same thing, if this current page is near the last page, the ellipsis or the none will be near the first page. So, and consecutively for 8 is also more towards the left side. So we can already see there's a logic here that we can use for when it is near the first page. So let me just add in the arguments first. So we have 3 and 4, 7 and 8. So for 3, we expect 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's at least one number beside the current page. That's one of the observations as well. There's always at least one number on each side. So 7, 6, and 8, 8, 7, and 9. And that's where the ellipses will move in. Okay, so here we have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then 9, 10. Here we should have a 9. All right, so if it's 7, so 6, 7, 8, 9. If it's 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, if you count these numbers, right, it's still 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2. And this is 5. So this is 7. 1, 2, 3. This is 4. So it's also 7. So it's still within the max length. And the ellipsis is moving depending on where the current page is. Remember our condition here? We need to check if it's near the first page. So we already know that we just need to handle ellipsis not in the middle in the else condition. We don't need to check anything like how we did in the middle. So whatever is left in the condition else, that's where we handle ellipsis is not in the middle. And we need to check here how do we determine if it's near the first page. If it's near the first page, that means that if we deduct the current page with the first page and the result of that is lesser than the deduction of last page and current page, then that's where we know it's near the first page. Let me just write that down in case you got confused. It's near first page. If we deduct this, and it's lesser than the deduction of last page, that's where we know it's near the first page. So if it's near the first page, we can generate the expected result array. Same thing here. There's a different way of generating the result array if it's near the last page. So let's handle this first scenario first, or the first two examples. So if its current page is 3, that's near the first page, because 10 minus 3 is 7 here. But if 3 minus 1 is 2, so this is lesser. So it's near the first page. What we want to do is basically loop until the current page plus 1. Remember, we have to have at least 1. 1 is here is static. It's not dynamic. And if it's 4, we need to loop until 4 plus 1. So basically, we can do is loop. What's the last letter? L, M, N. M, yeah. And we need to start from 1, which is the first page, and it should be less than or equal to the current page plus 1. And plus 1 here, as I said, is static. And plus plus, and we can just push M. Let's see what's it's giving us. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's correct. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is also correct. Now we can just push the none here. Okay, so now we're left with 9, 10, or 10. So how do we know how much remaining items we need to add into the result array? So we know for a fact that the length right now is 5. So we just deduct 5 with the max length. So 7 minus 5, there's 2. So we need to generate 2 items to fill in the max length of the result array. So we can do this by tracking the remaining length here. So it starts with the max length, right? And every time we push, we deduct by 1. Every time we push, we deduct by 1. So now, if we console log this, we will get the remaining length of 2 and 1. Right here, 2 and 1. That is correct. Okay, so now what do we do next? Basically, we can loop. We know how many times we need to loop, so we need to loop 2 times to fill in 9 and 10. So basically, we just deduct last page 10 minus the remaining length. So 10 minus remaining length is 8, and we need to start with 9. So we just deduct it with 1 more time to get the 9. So that, and okay, so we start with the last page minus the remaining length, and the remaining length we need to deduct that by 1 as well, so that it starts with 9, because we know the remaining length is 2, but we want to start with 9 because we already added 9 here. Okay, so n is less than or equal to the last page, and then none plus plus. We just push the n here. Let's see if we get the expected result. And yes, we do. So the length is still 7, which is the max length, and we are filling in the remaining numbers, or the remaining expected numbers. So 9 and 10 and 10. Great. So now we can just do the other side here. So in this case, we want to start from the last page. And we will basically do the opposite of this one. And the opposite of push is unshift. So what unshift does is it adds elements in the beginning of the array. So for example, we have 10 here, we want to add 9 in the beginning of the array, not on the right side, but here. And then we want to push again, 8, 7, something like this. So to achieve this array. So we want to have a loop that starts from the last page. It's O. We're going to have last page start. So we start with 10. We start with 10 here. And then we just keep deducting it until 6. Right? So how do we know 6? This current page minus 1. So if O is less than, if O is greater than, actually, it's greater than or equal to the current page minus 1. So 7 minus 1 is 6. So as long as it's greater than or equal to 6, then we just keep deducting, right? Now we can do unshift here. And we also should be deducting the remaining length. And then same thing here, but instead of push, shift. Let's see what's the, all right, so it does return us the expected one. So none, 6, 7, 8 to 10, and none, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now we just have to push or unshift the remaining items. So using this one, but the opposite side. So we basically start from the first page. We basically start from 2 here, 2 until the first page. So how do we start from 2? How do we know? So you know the remaining length here is 2. So we just use that one. So P, remaining length. And then we just keep deducting it until the first page. And yeah, that's how we get our expected result array. Let's just see this. All right. So yeah, we achieved what we expected here. And we're basically done. So I hope that wasn't difficult for you, and actually learn that, you know, when breaking things into smaller parts, we're basically able to achieve the expected outcome. So I'm just gonna comment this out. I don't want to log this anymore. And let's use 20 as our last page. Same thing as what we've been using in the first place. Okay, seems like we messed up the third and fourth example here, this should be else if. All right, so small thing is a note. Sorry about that. I missed this part. So it should be else if, and that should fix our pagination component. All right, so remember, handle ellipses in the middle, else if, handle two ellipses, and then the else condition will be handling ellipses not in the middle. All right, so I'm just gonna comment this out and change the last page to 20. And now you see that this is exactly what the reference we did earlier, where the ellipsis is in the middle. And as you go through, the ellipsis moves. And now we have two ellipses. Go through the 17, 18, yeah. Now ellipsis is here. Great, this is exactly what we expect it to be. We're basically done with the pagination component. You have just built your own pagination component in React and TypeScript. Now it's time to learn how to write tests for it using JS and testing library. So proceed to the next part of this video. Bye.